Welcome to the Teachers Impact Podcast, or better yet known as The Tip, where teachers can come to master their craft, use their voice, and enhance student learning. This is episode 65 of the Teachers Impact Podcast, better yet known as The Tip. On this episode, we'll be discussing 22 lessons I learned in 2022 with regards to teaching, and some other life lessons thrown in there. Stay tuned, and I think these are some really good lessons. This is part one of a short two-part series about 22 lessons I learned in 2022. The first lesson I learned was to make a plan, but move with the flow of your intuition. So plans give us a direction, but if something doesn't feel right, then we need to make a different choice. So don't get stuck on your plan. Be open, be flexible, and go with the flow of your intuition. Number 2, when making a decision, check in with yourself before asking everyone else. This is such a big lesson that I learned in 2022. We want to ask everyone else, but deep down, we really know the answer. So that's another important lesson I learned. So check in with yourself first. Number 3, prioritize and only focus on. This is episode 65 of the Teachers Impact Podcast, better yet known as The Tip. On this episode, we'll be discussing 22 lessons I learned in 2022. This is part one of a two-part series, and I'm just going to get right into it. So the first lesson I learned was to make a plan, but move with the flow of your intuition. So plans give us direction, but if something doesn't feel right, then I need to make a different choice. That's the first lesson I learned. Number 2, when making a decision, check in with yourself before asking everyone else. We tend to want to ask everyone else, but we know the answer deep down within us. And this is something that I definitely learned in 2022, to just check in with myself. What do you want? Or what do I want? What do I think before I go to anybody else, so I can have a better understanding of what I really feel and what I really want. Number 3 was to prioritize and only focus on 1 to 2 goals at a time. I'm such an ambitious person. I want to do a million things in one, but I need to stay focused and pick 1 or 2 goals that I really want to focus on with my students. Number 4 is to make the best decision for you, because you and you alone will have to deal with the consequences. So for me in teaching, that looks like whatever decision I make to do something or to not to do something, I'm going to have to be the one to deal with that consequence. The 5th lesson I learned is that it's okay to put other goals on the back burner. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just be sure to come back to it. So in teaching, if there's so many goals that we have to, SGOs or student growth objectives or professional development goals, school goals, district goals, there's so many goals. But again, think of just the 1 or 2 that you want to focus on and forget everything else, just so you don't get overwhelmed. The 6th lesson I learned is that joy is necessary, and don't forget to do the things that bring you joy. And this was something that I was really needing in 2022. And when I sat down and I thought about it, I was like, wow, what are the things that bring me joy? Because when I do the things that bring me joy, not only am I going to benefit, but my kids are going to benefit, because I'm going to be happier and just feel more refreshed and excited. Number 7 is teaching is a responsibility. And yes, everybody knows this. But to know it and to actually go through it is 2 different things. And I think as the years go on, the trend is it's going to be more and more responsibility being put on teachers. And as an educator, you have to make a decision. Is this something that I want to be doing with the continued added responsibilities? I don't see the responsibilities decreasing, so it's something that we need to think about. So teaching is a responsibility, but not only is it a responsibility, but the responsibilities are going to keep coming and coming and coming. Number 9 is to know your limits of what you can and can't handle. So I know for me, I have a very low tolerance for kids that display violent behavior. It does something to me, and I have to make sure that I'm aware of this, because it's definitely something that I know that's the limit for me. Once we know our limits, we're better able to adjust and to make a decision about a situation. Because if you know your limits, then you can say, okay, this is my limit. I'm not going past this limit. So I need to make a decision of what I'm going to do, because this is a no-go for me. The 10th lesson I learned is that administrators are also learning and developing. And so depending on the school district you're in, depending on the school that you're in, a lot of administrators, they come with different levels of experience and expertise. And you know what? It's okay to point out flaws in the system so that they are aware of it. They may not be aware of everything that is going on in the school, so it's okay to point it out with tact and with respect. They're learning and growing. They're not perfect. Just like how we need feedback, they will need feedback. Obviously, we have to be careful how, as a teacher, you're giving your thoughts and your opinions to an administrator, but they're learning and growing and developing. The 11th thing I learned in teaching last year, even as young as first grade, boys are already socialized not to cry. And if we have boys in our classroom that cry, we need to give them the space to do so, even if it's uncomfortable for you, or for us, I should say. So I noticed last year that I had boys, they would start crying and they would literally hold back the tears. And I would just sit there and I'd say, wow, like, you really feel like you cannot cry. Crying is a human emotion that everybody goes through. And for a boy that young in first grade, 6, 7 years old, that is tough to see. So as educators, we need to give them the space to do so and not feel the pressure to say, oh, why are you crying? Stop crying. And this is one of the lessons that I learned last year. So that's the 11th lesson that I learned. This was part 1 of the series. So one of the things I also wanted to add is that I'm trying to figure out a schedule for the podcast to come out. So before I was doing weekly, but with the teaching, it is very difficult. So I'm thinking of going to a bi-weekly schedule, releasing an episode every 2 weeks or every other week, which would take the pressure off of me. But I really want to be consistent. So I'm trying to figure it out. So if you see inconsistency, that is why. And again, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check out the website, teachersimpact.net. If you found this content helpful, please share, favorite, and rate on your favorite podcast app. It helps the show to grow, reach more teachers, and have an impact on student learning. You can email me at teachersimpacteducation@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram at Teachers Impact Podcast. Happy learning and growing.